Hello and welcome to Games Past the Prime. This show where I take a look at video games to determine if they are past their prime or not. For me to do so though, there are a couple key categories which I look at. Story, presentation, and gameplay. Then there's a conclusion section up at the end where I wrap everything up in a nice little bow. You guys have read the title. You know what game we're playing. Let's take a look at Doom 64. Doom 64 is a very interesting game in a lot of ways, so I'm very happy to be playing this game, though a bit frustrated as well, but that's kinda Doom for you. So first off, when I was looking for games to play and saw this one, I kinda laughed because the idea of playing Doom on the N64 seemed like a really bad idea. Equally, I thought this was a port of the OG Doom as well. However, I will say I am pleasantly surprised that I was mostly wrong on both of those accounts. For example, the story actually follows after Doom 2, making this the real Doom 3, before Doom 3. Frankly, this story is a lot better than Doom 3 as well. In case you don't know the Doom story, let me just catch you up real quick. Doom Guy is sent to Mars after assaulting a superior officer who had ordered his unit to fire on civilians. The Space Marines on Mars act as security for the Union Aerospace Corporation, also known as the UAC. UAC has radioactive waste facilities which are being used by the military to perform secret experiments with teleportation by creating gateways between the two moons of Mars, Phobos and Deimos. 3 years later, Deimos disappears and something evil starts to come out of the teleporter gateways, killing or possessing all personnel. The Marine unit is sent to investigate as the Doom Guy is left to guard the perimeter. However, everyone that went into the base is killed. Doom Guy has no idea how to pilot the shuttle off of Phobos and realizes his only way to escape is to fight his way through the base himself. As Doom Guy fights his way through the facilities on Phobos, he eventually makes his way to the teleporter, which leads him to Deimos. He finds Deimos is also crawling with demons, and he eventually makes his way through these bases as well, ending with a boss fight against a cyber demon. However, after the fight, Doom Guy finds that Deimos is actually now floating above Hell. Doom Guy decides to descend down into Hell and fights his way to the Spider Mastermind, who had planned the invasion of Earth.
FBI, open up!
After Doom Guy defeats the Spider Mastermind, a doorway back to Earth opens because he has proven himself to be too tough for Hell to contain. However, a burning city and Doom Guy's pet rabbit named Daisy, whose head is also impaled upon a spike, shows that the demons have in fact already invaded Earth. Now that was all of Doom 1's story, so now let me quickly talk about Doom 2. The humans that have so far survived the invasion of Hell have developed a plan to build massive spaceships which will carry the remaining survivors into space. However, Earth's only ground spaceport has been taken over by the demons, who just so happen to place a flaming barrier around it, preventing any ships from leaving. The Doom Guy is then tasked with fighting his way through the hordes of Hell and deactivating the shield which will allow the remaining survivors to escape, leaving only Doom Guy on the planet alone. Before Doom Guy decides to die, knowing he just saved the remainder of humanity, he receives a transmission from the survivors in orbit who manage to find out where the armies of Hell are coming from. That transmission states that the main base of the demons happened to set up shop inside the Doom Guy's hometown. Doom Guy now finds himself having to go back to his hometown to fight off the remaining hordes of demons. However, once there, he finds that there is no way to actually stop the invasion, at least from this side of the portal. So of course, Doom Guy decides to jump in to try to find a way to deactivate it from Hell's End. After making his merry stroll through Hell, Doom Guy finds himself fighting a rather large demon called the Icon of Sin. Upon killing this demon, it causes devastation to Hell, and the portal to Earth is sealed. Doomguy manages to join the other humans, and they all attempt to rebuild and restore life on Earth. Alright, now that's the story up to the point of Doom 64. So now, let us move on to the actual story of Doom 64. The story follows directly after Doom 2, where a planetary policy has established to quarantine the UAC research installations with apocalyptic levels of radiation. You know, because of demons. For many years, the installations stood motionless and abandoned, until of course one day, a long-forgotten satellite, barely functioning due to years of being subjugated to the high levels of radiation, sends a message back to Earth. The message indicated that a single entity with a large amount of rejuvenation powers that happen to be masked by the radiation levels has managed to escape detention. This entity was able to alter decaying dead carnage back into corrupted living tissue, resurrecting the demons. Doomguy, being the only experienced survivor of Hell's invasion, is sent in alone to again exterminate the demons. He later finds the demons had actually planned for this, only after he was lured back into Hell. Despite this setback, however, Doomguy is no stranger to Hell, and decides to take one final stroll through his second home.
I'm taking a stroll in the moonlight, taking a stroll, just taking a stroll. Feeling just right when I'm in the moonlight, taking a stroll. It's not a crime to pass the time with cadence and an occasional rhyme.
With the new weapon called the Unmakeer, he manages to kill the mother of demons. The game ends with the Doomguy deciding that he could no longer live a normal life after all he's been through, so he decides to remain in Hell forever to ensure no demons ever rise up again. Thus, the Doomguy becomes the Demon Exterminator.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
That is the full story of the Doom games up through this game, and I'm going to be honest, this story is absolutely batshit insane. But it fits the game incredibly well, and the story is more fleshed out than I actually thought it would be. The Doom games aren't exactly known for their story, so the fact that it all fits together in this way is actually pretty interesting, and much better than I expected. All in all, I really liked the story and I enjoyed it for what it was. It was very simple, but also got a few laughs out of me for how absolutely insane it is. Anyways, let us go on and move on to the presentation. So right away, you will see that the game is done with 2D pixel art graphics. I'm gonna be honest, I think this looks actually really good. Everything has a nice detail to it, and all of the art looks fantastic, though some of the levels can get a bit samey looking. The enemies all have revamped looks from the other Doom games, which is great to see, and it even fits in with the story elements. In fact, I'm going to throw some up on screen here so you can see what the OG models to the new models looked like as I continue talking on this point. Now, one downside of them putting this on the N64 is that the cartridges can't hold as much data as they would like to. So this means not all of the enemies could make it into the game, especially since they wanted to add a new one in the game called the Nightmare Imps. So this means some enemies had to get cut, such as the Revenants and the Zombie Chain Gunners. While they aren't in the game, I don't think this really impacts the overall experience that much at all, and hopefully you can see how the new looks look really good compared to the old ones. The nice thing is that the old models still look really good, but I like a lot of the newer designs a little bit more. Now, one of the main downfalls I had with this game is that it is really dark, down to the point where I can't see where I'm going at times, which then eventually led to my death on more than one occasion.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
This aside though, I overall like the design choices from the levels to the enemies. Next, let's move on to the sounds, and boy, they did another great job here. The guns all sound pretty good, even the new one in the Unmakeer. Now, one thing that you will end up missing is that of the fantastic soundtrack you typically expect from a Doom game. Now, don't get me wrong, the one in this game isn't bad, but it is no Doom 1. However, what this allows is the ambient and the monster noises to take a larger foot forward than other Doom games. This in turn makes the atmosphere of this game a bit darker and more creepy than in other Doom games in my opinion. I would be absolutely lying if this game didn't catch me off guard a couple times when it came to its creep factor.
NANI?!
Hello, motherfucker.
Now to be fair, I'm pretty easy to scare to be honest, which is why I'm not looking forward to October this year. Anyways, let us move on to the music. I'll play a couple of tracks that I think were the best. They are overall pretty good, but they do tend to be pretty quiet at times, so we'll be finding the parts of the tracks where they tend to be louder, but do note that most of the tracks have quite a few parts where the sound is almost non-existent. So the gameplay of Doom 64 is exactly what you would expect if you played a Doom game, ever. Even if you haven't played one, I'm sure you can sort of imagine what one would play like. However, rather than leaving up to your imagination, let me explain. So right away, you will be just dropped into a level. You'll progress through that level, picking up various weapons along the way, either through finding them or picking them off dead bodies. Most stages require you to pick up colored keys, which will then allow you to open up that colored door. You'll fight through hordes of demons to get to these keys, and eventually they will lead you to an exit room, where you will press a button to move on to the next stage. However, this is only the bare minimum within the game. It is a little more complicated than this. Most keys require you to either complete a puzzle or complete some type of trial. These tend to range in difficulty, but I would say overall they aren't that bad for most people. Now, another thing within these games are many secrets, and these secrets can lead to better weapons or even an alternate ending to that level that will lead you to a different stage than normal. These bonus stages also typically have story elements tied to them, while also leading to demon artifacts which will increase the power of the Unmakeer. To receive these artifacts though, you tend to need to also do some type of puzzle, or the worst one for me, platforming. Now, platforming in Doom is very simple really, but also can take a bit to get used to. See, you don't really jump at all. You don't climb either, so you may be asking, how does one platform then? In Doom, you carry a certain amount of speed and momentum. If you happen to be going full speed, you sometimes can basically quote-unquote jump over small gaps. However, if you want to get over slightly larger gaps, you will need to master strafe movement. As you strafe in a diagonal direction, you tend to gather a bit more speed than just moving straight forward or backward. I'm not exactly sure why this is, but it does allow you to get over these larger gaps which tend to hide secrets. So if you want to get the most of the game, you will need to master doing this. Now before I get into talking more in depth about the game, I feel we should probably move on and talk about the controls first. So the controls are pretty simple in Doom here. So you have your forward and backward with your control stick. You can turn right and left by just simply turning left and right on the control stick. Now A and B will allow you to cycle through your weapons. As you can see, I don't have too many to start out with, so we'll just pick up another gun here, and then I'll cycle through your weapons. There's no need to reload in this game, so you don't actually have a reload button, which is kind of handy actually in its own way. The right C button will allow you to open doors. I don't have obviously anything to open here, so I can't show you that, but if I could, the right C button would open those doors. The left C button allows you to run. It is a little bit faster. You can't tell a whole lot of difference, at least I can't, but you do in fact move a little bit faster. Now, if you press the C button up here, this will bring up your map with textures on. If you press it again, it will take away those textures, so it's a little easier to see actually where all the walls and lines are. It's a little nicer in this mode. But just be aware that while you are in this, the game is not paused. I can actually still move here. You can see the cursor move. I'm actually moving within the game still. So if an enemy was around me, I could still be hurt or killed by an enemy during this. If I press the up C button again, it'll take away the map. Now, if I press the C button down and push left or right on the control stick, rather than turning, I will sort of sidestep or strafe. Now this is incredibly important in this game, because with this allows you to maneuver across gaps while running. So if I am doing it at a diagonal corner here, I will actually move at a pretty good space here. Now one thing I want to show you here real quick is the last thing you need to know, which is how to shoot your gun. It's going to be the Z button on the bottom of the controller here. So just to show you this, there we go. Just take out a couple of enemies here. Pretty simple controls. Nothing too complicated. And that is literally all the controls, other than start button brings up your menus. You can go back to the main menu, restart, you got all your options. That's literally pretty much the entire controls. It's actually not that complicated. It just takes a while to get used to basically strafing and getting used to using that to actually get around corners to shoot enemies. It allows you to peek around corners. It allows you to do a lot of things that you will need to do if you really want to beat this game, even on the easier difficulties. Using these controls, you must learn how to use them properly, or you will not have a very fun time. Anyways, let's head back to the main script. Alright, so now that we talked a bit about the controls, I can now move on to talking about other aspects within this game. So the movement feels a bit tank control-ish, as you may have saw. However, this doesn't really affect the game in a poor way like it does in others. There are two reasons for this. First, you don't need to aim up or down. You simply aim at what you want to hit and it just sort of locks onto things above or below you. This means you don't need separate movement for the head, which makes it easy to lock the camera always facing forward. This also means you only need to move forward, backward, turn side to side, and strafe side to side. Now, as you saw in the control segment, to strafe, you just need to hold the down C button down. You will quickly get used to this movement, but it does take a bit to master. But it is essential for dodging enemy attacks while being able to land your own shots. Overall, the movement feels really solid in this game. Better than I would have actually expected, because typically I trash tank controls, especially in shooters. For whatever reason here though, it just works.
Stop! You violated the law. Pay the court a fine or serve your sentence. Your stolen goods are now forfeit.
Another thing I wanted to mention is that this game is actually pretty hard. I'm playing on just normal difficulty, and frankly I'd be lying if I didn't have my fair share of deaths. Now this isn't always due to my own fault. In fact, quite quickly you'll find that this game is in fact not very fair. You will find yourself falling into pits or finding yourself in a trap that you didn't see coming. While this normally feels really annoying in most games, I'll give it a pass here. The reason why is frankly pretty simple. It's the setting. You're fighting demons. Do you really think the army of hell would play fair?
How could this happen to me? I made my mistakes, got nowhere to run. The night goes on as I'm fading away. I'm sick of...
Because of this, I actually see this normally cheap deaths as a way to actually further immerse me into the game. And frankly, it does this job far better than I would have expected, and probably far better than I would actually like it to. There's also a wide variety of weapons to use, from your fists and chainsaws all the way up to the BFG 9000 and the Unmakeer. Every gun in this game has its use to an extent. For example, early on you'll find yourself using the pistol and shotgun, since this is all you really have. You may use the chainsaw mostly for the fun of it, but it's not something you will likely find yourself using that often. Eventually you'll get the super shotgun, and this will end up being, most likely, your primary weapon within the game. It deals a lot of damage and has a good amount of spread where you can take down a room of zombies in 2 or 3 shots. Now the downside is it takes a second to recover after every shot, so it's not exactly the fastest either. In this case you use the chain gun, which still has a use if you say want to stun lock an enemy in place. Otherwise it deals rather low damage and isn't used that often. You then of course have the trusty rocket launcher that can deal quite a bit of damage. However, the biggest downside is that it has a good amount of splash damage, so if you are even slightly close to an enemy, you will likely end up hurting yourself. You do also have a plasma gun, which I only really used when I ran out of everything else. Then of course you have the BFG 9000, which is pretty iconic and I shouldn't even need to mention what it does. And the Unmakeer, a new weapon in this game. The Unmakeer shoots lasers and uses the same ammo type as the BFG 9000 and the plasma rifle. It does a decent amount of damage, but what makes it really strong is when you upgrade with the demon artifacts. When you do this, it starts to shoot faster, then adds a second laser it shoots, then finally it adds a third laser which can all shoot different enemies. This gun is great for clearing out hordes of enemies or killing bosses really fast. Speaking of bosses, the final boss, Mother of Demons, is rather easy to beat if you happen to have the Unmakeer with all of its artifacts. Which I actually kind of like this idea, because if you didn't go out of your way and go through the pain of doing this, the fight is a little harder. I appreciate the time that I spent getting the weapon and being given a reward in the fact that I can take out the final boss rather easily as long as I went out of my way to get the demon artifacts. Also on a side note, how does Doom Guy even carry all of these weapons at once? I mean, aren't they rather heavy? Does he have like a large backpack or a wheeled cart he's constantly carrying around or pushing around or something? I just don't get it. I think I've covered most of the important parts about this game that I wanted to address. Frankly, I enjoyed most of the gameplay elements here. Another great example is that there is no recharging health in this game. You need to pick up health packs and armor yourself. There are even some power-ups in this game, such as Supercharge, which gives you more armor and can give you over 100 health. There's also invincibility and invisibility as well. There's just so much great about this game, and I frankly could drag this on and talk in depth about every little detail about this game.
It's time to stop! It's time to stop, okay? No more! Where the fuck are your parents? Who are your parents? I'm gonna call Child Protective Services. It's time to stop!
However, I feel this script is already getting a little long, and so I will just move on to the verdict section. The verdict of Doom 64 is a game not past its prime. This is another one of those games where I'm sure I made myself pretty clear that there is very little fault in this game other than it being a bit dark for me to see sometimes, and some of the levels looking a bit similar to one another. Overall, I have pretty much nothing majorly negative to say about this game, which I will say really surprised me. So with that said, let's move on to the top 5 reasons I believe this game to not be past its prime. Number 1. The story is better than I actually thought it would be. Granted, it's pretty simple and it isn't very long, but it's a Doom game. I don't expect it to be very in-depth. However, what I did get is more story than I remember being in Doom games to start with, so that's a plus. Number 2. The presentation is very well done. The pixel art is fantastic, and frankly even now the demons are a bit creepy to look at. The music is not exactly my favorite, but I can respect it for what it does, which is to help build tension around the player, rather than giving them an awesome metal-like soundtrack. Number 3. The controls just somehow work for this game way better than I frankly expected them to. I found myself recently not really enjoying my time playing FPS games on the N64 or GameCube, for example, though Metroid is an exception there. However, it just works here. It feels incredibly natural, and while it did take me a while to get used to the strafing in the game, it didn't take that long. The strafing is frankly a key to being able to beat this game. And while the game is hard, it does a pretty good job at starting out fairly simple and working you more into it and getting more and more difficult for the most part. Number 4. The puzzles are actually pretty fun in the game, to be honest. Some of them take a bit of thinking before you solve them, but it's pretty rewarding to get them done, while also killing every single demon that you happen across. I mean, who doesn't enjoy watching a demon explode when you hit it point blank with a super shotgun in the face? Then of course the final and most important part of any game I play, I just had fun with it. While there was of course times that would frustrate me, this didn't take away from the game that much. Typically this would lead to me just needing to either change up my playstyle or taking a short break to think of a better way to approach that level. Which I actually enjoy this process, as long as it doesn't get in the way of me enjoying my time with the game. Now, if the controls were bad with this on top of it, then I might have been bothered by the process, but because the controls are tight and feel good, I knew that about 75% of the time I died was actually my own fault, while the other 25% were silly traps which, after I knew about, I would just jump back into the level right away to finish it, so there was no need for me to have to actually take a break and process on those. Frankly, I don't think I can sing the praises of this game higher than I already have. Frankly, you should do your best to play this game, either on the N64 or the recent remaster done with the new Doom Eternal game that just recently released. You frankly have no reason to not play this game, and you really, really should. Alright guys, that's the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did enjoy watching it, please consider subscribing. I upload videos every Sunday. Stay tuned to the end of the video to get an audio hint of what my next video will be. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and thanks for watching.